My name is Isabelle McConville, and I am a bookseller and producer here at Barnes& Noble, and I am so excited to be here with the author of The Sprawl, Searching for John Hughes, author of the Melt Substack, and most recently, Kaplan's Plot. Jason Diamond, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Isabel, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I wonder if you can please start by setting up the story of your new book for us.
Oh boy, where do I start? Well, it's I've been told it's the Godfather 2, but Jewish, which I don't think is a fair comparison. But it does take place along two different timelines, early 20th century and the modern day, and it's about a son and his mother trying to piece together her father, his grandfather's past, and the grandson never knew his grandfather, and the mother barely knew him. And what they kind of uncover is uh, some pretty shady, sordid details that they maybe weren't aware of before, or maybe they were. I don't know, but that's what you have to figure out when you read it.
Yes, and I had a lot of fun figuring that out and piecing things together as I read this book. It was one that I actually did read in one sitting just because I needed to know what happened. And I once I fixate on something, like I have to get every piece of information, everything about this book. I need it in my brain like as fast as possible.
Mhm.
So I had a lot of fun just flying through this. I wonder, I know in the past your thing has been more nonfiction, obviously with the Sprawl and Searching for John Hughes. So how did you know it was time to write a novel?
Well, I always wanted to write novels. I mean, I've been a fiction reader my entire life. I mean, even when I was a kid, I was making my family buy me Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew books. And I mean, just from the get-go, I've just always loved reading fiction. I always wanted to write it. But I think there was a point where I just got so used to writing nonfiction and writing profiles and writing reviews and writing just everything. And I became sort of like a Swiss Army knife for editors. Like they could kind of get me to write about anything as long as I was interested in it. I guess if that makes sense. I have to be
Yep.
really interested in something because I have to like it and has to kind of tickle my fancy, I guess, for me to want to write about it. But around 2020, my second book had come out, and if you remember 2020, that was not a very fun time for any of us. And
hmm
I had done my entire book tour resume. We were all stuck inside, and my agent and I were talking. He's like, "What do you want to do next?" And I'm like, "I want to get as far away from reality as possible." Um, and
Yeah.
so the best way to do that is fiction.
Mhm.
And I tinkered around for about a year or so, trying to like really figure out how I was going to do it, like how I was going to separate the nonfiction writer, out of the equation. And I started to realize I was like, maybe I should like lean on the nonfiction writer a little bit and like use what he understands in terms of like putting together a story and then kind of build it from there. And so I just kind of kept playing around for about a year until I found that like right formula of like voice plus uh I guess just the way to do it essentially.
Yeah, I'm always so interested in the actual, creation process of a book. I think it's something that a lot of people who are especially people who are not authors, maybe people
Mhm.
who want to be an author one day, are fascinated with. It's just like, how do you bring this idea from your head into almost this movie that plays in your brain when you're reading words on a page? Do you remember a spark or what really, like the kernel that really popped this story for you?
Oh, absolutely. So there's a nonfiction writer. His name is Rich Cohen. He's written a ton of books. I read everything he writes. One of his earliest books was a book called Tough Jews, and I forget, it might have come out around 2000. And so it was one of the first books I think I've ever read, and I think that's maybe ever come out that kind of highlighted these sort of characters like Meyer Lansky, Jarl Rothstein, Bugsy Siegel, and kind of place him in this different context that, you know, this was a thing. Like Jewish gangsters were pretty much just as normal as Italian gangsters in the 20s and 30s. I loved the book, but the thing is, my own family, my mother's family, they're from Chicago, and they've got a lot of ties to a lot of shady kind of people. Um, and I grew up around those kinds of people. And I was like, the people that Rich had written about, and interestingly enough, Rich is also from the same, he's from the Chicagoland area like I am, but I'm a little younger, and the people I grew up with were like the ones that came after the 20s and 30s and 40s. They were like, the older guys when I was a kid, but they were so fascinating to me. And I'm like, I want somebody to write about these guys, like the guys who, are family friends who, I'm being told owned dry cleaning businesses, but it turned out they were loan sharks. Guys who I found out had been to prison for weird things like racketeering, which I had no idea what that was when I was a kid. But I was like, I don't know what the story is there. And the more I started to think about it, I'm like, here's the thing about fiction, Jason. You've got to remember it doesn't have to stick to the rules of nonfiction. So I could play around with it. I could stretch the truth as far as I wanted to. And so I just kept stretching things that I knew. I started making composites of people I've known, things I've heard, and it just grew in my mind. It sort of composed itself. And, the next step was to start jotting it down and making it, readable.
Which character really came first to you?
I actually think it was Rose, the grandmother.
Really? Oh, wow.
I had started writing something short from her point of view. And it just sort of grew from there. Like, I'm like, okay, how does Rose see this world? And then I kind of started playing around with like, okay, I'm moving it out from Rose. And I'm like, I'm gonna write about her daughters. And then, so it started from the women in the story, and then it
Hmm.
kind of grew into like Yitz was a little easier. Like the one of the main characters, he's the grandfather, the kind of like he is the Kaplan
Hmm.
of the plot. But I think he was the easiest to write, so I kind of went to him last. But yeah, I think it was Rose the grandmother. And then then I whittled her down a lot because I'm like, okay, I need to have her step back and have her really come into the story later on. And I won't get too into it. I don't want to
Hmm.
spoil anything, but yeah, yeah, she's like the mother of the whole story, literally.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a story without Rose, so that does make sense to me. What was it like to kind of, obviously we're dancing around spoilers here, but what was it like to kind of get in her head and really piece together her voice?
It was hard. That's actually, that's the funny thing about being a nonfiction for writing nonfiction. So I'm a writer, first of all. I always say I'm just a
Hmm.
writer, but um, having written nonfiction for so long, the things like when you're profiling somebody, you're looking for things. You're looking for like hand gestures or eye movements, or just you're looking for color around you. You're looking, you can't really you can get into their head in a way to try to like get them to talk to you more, but you can't like write about what you think they might be thinking. And it's funny because you hear writers talk about, oh, I got really involved in this one character and it really stuck with me. And I was like, that's not going to happen to me. And I was like haunted by Rose the entire time. Like I think she's still kind of with me because um her voice reminds me of a lot of the women I knew growing up, like older women I knew. And in some ways, her voice is my grandma Ann, who passed away when I was about 3. And I think by creating this character, I sort of got in touch with these people I didn't even know. And I kind of asked them, hey, want to talk to me a little bit? It was kind of weird. it was not what I was expecting because I was never one of those people who's like, I'm gonna channel the muse, and I'm gonna. But I really did get super involved with like putting myself in her headspace and trying to have like empathy for all of the characters.
Mhm.
But her being the first one, it was like really. I had to talk to my shrink about it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it was like I had to let go after a long day of thinking about Rose. And then as it grew and I started really getting into the other characters, it was like I had a lot of I was like, oh, this is not good to have all these voices in my head. So I was like, okay, let's just focus who we're talking to today. And yeah, it was a pretty heady experience that I was not as prepared for as I thought I was.
I feel like also I've seen a lot of chatter online about what it means when a character haunts the narrative. Um, and I do think that that's what Rose does in this book. Would you
Yeah.
agree?
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing. Yeah, I would agree. And I also think it's a haunted book. I mean,
Yeah.
in a way, it's like, the title, it's kind of I'm being playful with the title in some
Hmm.
ways, but I mean, it's a book about being haunted. It's a book about being haunted by the past you don't even know about, which, so many good ghost stories. Somebody goes into a house, it's haunted. They don't know the ghosts. They don't know why they're being haunted. And so I really thought a lot about that as I was writing this, and I was thinking about, you know, I'm a big fan of redemption, in general. I would like everyone to be redeemed in this life, in this
Hmm.
world or the next, however that works. Um, I'm not very religious, but I do think that at some point we have to there comes a point in our existence where it's like, here's what we did wrong and here's what we did right, and hopefully it all plays out well for us in the end and whatever
Yeah.
comes after the end. And the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, okay, I really need to make this about everybody in this book is haunted by something and they're
Hmm.
holding on to something, a living or dead. And I need to figure out how I can best help them come to grips with those things. And it
Yeah.
was it was a lot.
That makes me think a lot about this theme that obviously is running through the book that Elijah, our other main
Hmm.
character, um points out at one point in the book uh, intergenerational trauma that
Hmm.
he's dealing with, that his family, the people before him, have dealt with. And he even mentions watching like a video of academics talking about this.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can tell me a little bit about what interests you about that and why you wanted it to be such a major theme in the book.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is, I mean, there's two real reasons. The one is just personal. I've had to come up with understanding myself through the lens of like, okay, I'm the child of an immigrant whose parents were Holocaust survivors and whose families were uh, all wiped out. And before that, they were living my grandma literally had her family had to leave Russia because they were basically chased out. Um, my mom's family, same thing,
Hmm.
lived through the pogroms, and who knows, And so, there was all this personal stuff that when I think about my own, like, I've dealt with depression a lot. I've dealt with a lot of like heavy mental illness stuff. But I started really kind of like I used to be really hard on myself about it, but then I'm like, there's an interesting thing about your brain, and obviously there's chemicals and there's a lot of things that we don't understand about the brain, but I'm like, there's so much that we literally cannot understand because we weren't there for it, and it carries over into who you are, and
Hmm.
it comes with you the second you're born. Whether it's like developed in your brain as you're in the womb, I don't know how it happens, but maybe it's your parents pass it on to you as you're growing up. I don't know. But it's just something I've always thought about since I learned that it was a legitimate, true,
Hmm.
real thing that intergenerational trauma exists. And then the second reason is because, I think in a lot of ways this book is going to get labeled as a Jewish book. I made the joke about it being the Jewish Godfather too, but to me, it's all about America.
Hmm.
And um, since I was writing Jewish characters, I wanted to make the point throughout the book, and I'm subtle about it at some points, and then towards the end, when I'm talking about intergenerational trauma, I'm trying to be a little bit more literal. Um, we are always told that, oh, we're so different from each other in America, and it's such a melting pot. It is, but um, we have so much in common, everybody in this country. And one of the things, and I know it's been a hot topic for the last few years, the trauma plot and trauma in fiction, but I don't care who you are. We all have it in some way or
Hmm.
another. If your family came to America, which it's almost I mean, I don't know the mathematic equations because I'm a writer, not a I got into be writing to stray from numbers, but unless your family has been native to this country the entire time, and even if they are, that's you still have intergenerational trauma.
Hmm.
Like that's that's actually everybody probably has intergenerational trauma in
Yeah.
America. They don't even know it. Um, and so I wanted to sort of like talk about the things that bond us, and that was my way of doing it because something I've thought about over the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years of my life as I've really tried to understand it is we've all come from something rough, like really bad. Like it doesn't matter where you're, if they're from Ireland, if they're from Russia, if they're from China, if whatever, everybody, the reason they came to America is because they had to leave something else. And somewhere down the line, somebody in your family experienced something really traumatic, and you're a miracle because of that. Like the fact that they made it through that and they made it here, that makes sort of everybody kind of a miracle if you really think about it.
Yeah.
And
No.
yeah, I really wanted to sort of highlight that. And it's something that I think about pretty often when I'm trying to deal with people and be like, man, we've all come from something. And that's how I try to, that's really one of my big philosophies in life. And it just carried over into the fiction.
Yeah, and I think that's why empathy is so important. And that really comes through in the pages of your novel as well, especially thinking about how you thought about Rose and how she felt empathy for her family and how we can feel empathy for this entire family just through their story. I wonder if we can switch gears for a minute and talk about Yitz because he was such an incredible character to me. We first meet him and his brother Solomon or Saul,
Mhm.
fleeing Ukraine and boarding a ship to the United States. How did you find the voice of Yitz's character as a child? Because he really was such a great character, especially when he was younger, and we kind of see him evolve into this like hardened man over time. I wonder if you can talk about like that evolution and starting off with writing him as a child.
Yeah, when I started writing him, I started writing him as a child. So
Mm.
it was really weird. It was, obviously this is my first novel. I really had to do a lot of playing around. Like I have no, I hate to say training in fiction, but like I didn't go for an MFA. I didn't go for anything. So everything I was doing was like just trying things out. And that's one of the things that worked. I was like, okay, let's start him out in Odessa and let's just work from there. And it's sort of the one thing that was natural with him was sort of the Faustian sort of bargain where it's like he needs he's going to want to live his whole life feeling safe and feeling secure. So that's easier for me when he's older because I lived with people who needed that life, who needed that sort of thing, which I can get to later. But so I'm like, how do I start him as a child? And I had sort of a traumatic childhood. My family has been, for my I wrote it about in my first book, but my family has never been we've never been very close. There's always a lot of fighting and violence and anger and addiction and all these things. And so I just sort of channeled the sort of what was I thinking as a kid viewing all of this chaos? And I'm like, okay, I kind of understand this. I can get to that really easily. And I'm like, okay, start thinking about it through another person's eyes, and then start kind of like closing your eyes and putting, I've read so much about Eastern Europe and Ukraine and Odessa specifically because my family comes from that part, and I loved Isaac Babel stories, and they're all set in Odessa. But so I just kind of started telling myself this story in my head and just building it from there and writing notes down and just kind of building it.
Yeah, and I actually have a quote here. It's one of my favorite from the book. I immediately highlighted it in my galley as soon as I read it, and I'd love to talk about it. I'm going to read it. For reasons he could never explain, ever since he was a boy, Yitz felt perpetually on the verge of tears. I feel like so many of us can relate to that, especially if we come from rough childhoods, I'll say.
Mhm.
That really got me. And I wonder if you can just tell me a little bit about writing that line and, what you wanted it to do for us as a reader when we think about Yitz.
I mean, that was me. That was literally me. I've always felt that way.
Hmm.
I cry. I have no like it's not even like one of those things at this point where I'm like, I'm a dude, I cry. I've just always uh I've always found reasons, whether it's happy or sad, to cry. And it's something that I've always been like, why does it just overtake me? And I think that just came out in the whole putting myself and using my own experiences with him,
Yeah.
or for Yitz. And I just was like, he also comes from this his parents and grandparents and great grandparents, they experienced things that were terrible and were passed down. And so to me, I've I the only thing I can come up with is why I'm always feeling like I'm ready to cry if something happens, whether it be good or bad, is it's just something that's out of my control that came with me when I came out into the world on that very hot July day. Um, I think that was just sort of implanted in me, and it's from generations of dealing with terrible things.
Yeah.
And Yitz had that, and I think all the characters, if you would ask them, they probably felt that.
I think that line also tells us a little bit about the repression that Yates forces on himself, and that's also forced on him by the people around him. I think he's holding in his tears because he knows that's what he has to do. I mean, especially in that scene specifically, you don't let him cry.
Right. I mean, emotions, specifically men having emotions,
Hmm.
mental illness, um, depression, ADHD, all of these things that I have, and I've dealt with my entire life. These aren't new things. We just kind of started giving them, first we started giving them, we started building an idea for what they are scientifically, then we started giving them names, and then the names maybe evolved, and then our cultural understanding of these things hopefully has evolved. I think it has in a lot of ways. Some ways I
Hmm.
don't think it has. So it's not like somebody in like the early 20th century didn't want to cry.
Yeah.
That's a funny thing. It's like we have this idea in our head that in our heads, it's always like, oh, our grandparents and great grandparents, they were hard people. They, didn't have emotions. That's the lie. They definitely had emotions.
Yeah.
Everybody had. It's just life hardened them a certain way, and life still hardens people. Um, but we have ways of coping, and we have different ways of lying to ourselves, I guess.
Yeah.
And in the early 20th century, it doesn't matter where you were. If you were a man, a young boy, I don't think, I think it was, if you cried, it was probably, from everything I've been told, everything I've read, uh, you would get slapped. They would
Yeah.
slap the crying out of you. And so, um, a person like Yitz wasn't allowed to cry. And as he gets older, all he can do is just keep pushing that down.
Hmm.
And when you keep pushing that down, it's,
It
you
comes out in
know,
other ways.
yeah,
I also want to talk a little bit about Elijah for a second. He's very down on his luck when we
yeah.
meet him. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about starting the book off with him in such a tough spot. I mean, he's pretty much a disgraced, divorced, down on his luck tech bro, if you
Yeah.
will. Um, I wonder if you can tell me a little bit about his backstory and why you chose to write him this way and really how you found his voice.
Um, so I thought it was kind of funny doing the down on his luck tech bro thing just because I feel like that's who everybody's hating on these days.
Mm,
Everybody wants to just hate tech people. Like, it's like it's just so easy because AI is ruining things. And then a couple of years ago it was YouTube and TikTok and Facebook and everything tech is ruining things. And maybe it is. I'm not a big fan of these things. I mean, I use Instagram all the time and I'm on Substack, and so I guess maybe I shouldn't say I don't like these things, but the way we talk about people in the tech world is like they're the worst. They just give their lives over to robots and money, and maybe that's true again. But um, again, I like redemption, and
mhm,
I think at some point in his life, Elijah gave his life over to tech and money and thought those were, oh yeah, I'm going to have a great life because I'm going to be rich and I'm going to work in the tech world and blah blah blah. And it didn't pan out. And so um I just thought it was kind of a funny, and that's the thing, I kind of weirdly enough, I kind of try to always go for funny. Like, that's like
yeah.
I go for funny and then it's like, well, I gotta move past funny. And uh sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But um I just thought it was like an interesting way to sort of look at a person because if you say, oh, he's a tech bro, even you say tech bro, it's like I say tech bro. Uh that's we say it with like this hint of disdain, but I'm like, I feel like everybody's worthy of some sort of redemption arc, and that was what I wanted to do. And so, and it also was just funny because to me, my whole life has been pretty much Chicago. I was born in Chicago, but I've now lived in Brooklyn most of my life. So I've lived in these two cities that to me are like the two cities.
Hmm.
And I love a lot of other cities, but it's kind of hard going anywhere in America and being like, oh yeah, this is better than where I'm from because it's Chicago and New York. That's that's it to me. But I really love the idea of the Chicagoan going anywhere. To me is so funny because Chicagoans are so proud, and I don't want to say provincial, but we're very like what I mean, listen, look at, we're in the middle of the middle and everything else is okay. Like Iowa, I mean, what, Southern Illinois, Wisconsin, where the Packers are. Oh my God, the Packers. Oh, so you can't like Wisconsin, but uh, I love Wisconsin. Just so I'm clear. But it's just this funny thing. Like as when you're in Chicago and you're from Chicago and you're of Chicago, you're very aware and proud of that. And so when I left Chicago and moved to New York, it immediately became like, oh, big New York guy, hi, Mr. Manhattan, how you doing? And so I was like, yeah, I've known New York. I've had New York in my life since I was a kid. My dad grew up here, so it's not. But San Francisco is a whole other thing. Like, if I
Mm.
were to move to San Francisco, then you could make fun of me, because to me, it's like, to me, the culture there, the tech culture, I love San Francisco. I love the city itself, and people who are from there are great. But the tech culture that has kind of taken it over is so not Chicago to me. And like, Chicago has its own, Google has come in and there's a lot of tech there, but it's just like it's not the same. It's not the whole hippy dippy kind of weird, I don't know, buy into this culture vibe that took over the city. Like it's still Chicago to me. So yeah, to me, San Francisco is like the anti-Chicago, and it just was like a funny comparison.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I like what you said about wanting to give Elijah the chance for redemption in this book because I do think we see him go on a great transformation throughout this novel. And I think what's funny about his character to me too is that his mother Eve really keeps him on his toes.
Yeah.
They butt heads a lot throughout most of the novel. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about writing their relationship.
I mean, that was fun. My own relationship with my mother has never been that great. And but the relationship, the part of the relationship that I've always sort of enjoyed is if there has ever been any closeness, it's because I really had to do my best to just figure out what she was thinking. And like I really had to like, okay, what are the tells here? Like what and when a relationship is built on that, a lot of secrecy and silence, it could sort of just be sad and depressing when you want to write about it. And so I'm like, okay, there is something inherently sad about parents and a parent and a child not really being able to communicate with each other. But I think, there's something sort of a little deeper here. And I don't want to make it like she's a bad mother or he's a bad son, because it's not
Yeah.
about good or bad. It's
Hmm.
about they're just scarred people.
Yeah.
Elijah's a broken man, and Eve, is dying and has her own trauma and stuff that she has never been able to fully work out. And so I kind of just wanted to play with it a little bit, and I kind of took it from weirdly enough, I kind of took it from I love buddy comedies.
Hmm.
And I thought about a lot about the movie Midnight Run with Charles Grodin and Robert De Niro, and I'm like, I like that sort of where it's like they're just giving like the hard one gives the they kind of give each other a little bit, but just enough. And I just kind of kept teasing it and playing with it. I'm like, okay, I need this to be the right tone throughout, but um I wanted them to sort of grow together
Yeah.
because not I wrote the book before the birth of my own child. But my wife got pregnant as I was finishing it. And so I had to spend a lot of time thinking about the child parent relationship. And one of the first things that came up to me is I think, my daughter is one day going to tell me she hates me and that I'm a dork. And I know that, but like right now I'm the funniest human being she's ever met because she's 15 months. But,
Oh.
But something that has always kind of blown my mind is I've always felt like a lot of parents treat their children like they're not smart, or they
Mm.
know they're smart, but they're not as smart as them because they
Yeah.
don't know, But to me, I'm like, okay, here's the thing. I am going to go at this as best I can and try to be on my child's level when we're just hanging out playing. I'm going to just try to vibe with her and see what she's doing. And I started thinking a lot about how is our relationship going to blossom? Like, how is this going to change and grow? And what mistakes will I make? And so I wanted to like, I was just thinking so much about it from you know, my own point of view and my own, you know, possible experiences that I might have. And I think a lot of that sort of got fed into their relationship. Like, oh, I want them to grow together and I want her to start taking him more seriously, and I want him to start appreciating her more. Again, it's a redemption thing in a
Hmm.
way, but um, it was funny because it started out me writing about me trying to like play with my own relationship with my mother, and then it turned into my relationship with my then unborn child.
It's funny how books can do this for us, right? We can work through our own lives by reading or in your case writing these novels that deal with something that we might not even think applies to our own lives, and then suddenly I'm like rethinking my relationship with my mother, you know?
Yeah.
So it's funny how books can do that. I think that's why I love to read.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, when people try to downplay the effects reading fiction can have on people,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, maybe the empathy thing is overrated. I'm like, no, it's not. It's if you're truly reading, if you're really like engaging with fiction, not like these people who say they read 100 books a year, but they're all audiobooks, they speed up. It's like if you're really engaging with fiction, I mean, listen, that's my whole life. I've been
Yeah.
reading my whole life, and I have had to put myself in everybody's place, like every kind of person from, dishwashers in Orwell's books to immigrants to people from countries that I'm not from, people who don't speak the same languages. I've had to put myself in all of their shoes because of fiction. And I don't know. I think I'm okay. I'm a decent person. I could always be better, but I think a lot of the reason I'm the way I am is because of fiction. In fact, no,
Yeah.
I know that. So,
I could say the same about myself for
yeah.
sure. Another thing I do want to touch on before we wrap up, there's another theme. We talked about this a little bit earlier of like this idea of the American dream that we see in both Yit and Elijah, I think in two different ways. They kind of live out two versions of what we believe the American dream to be, where Yitz is literally coming to America to build a life for himself, and Elijah is kind of building a life off of the help from his parents and what was laid out before him.
Mhm.
Um, and whether or not either is a success or a failure, I think we can leave up to the reader. But I wonder if you can tell me a little bit about that. And actually, I do also have another quote. I can quote you to you one more time.
Mhm.
The reason a country like America could exist was that little guys could become big ones if they worked hard. Can you tell me about writing that and just how that pertains to the story?
That one's about about Elijah's father, right?
Yep.
About his, yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. That was actually something I mean, I have enough experience as the child of an immigrant who I watched my father. I've always made the comparison to Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman with him because
Mm,
my father came to America. My grandfather and he and my grandfather built a business, and my dad's whole life was business. And he did it. It was a very like immigrant story. Like they found a niche, and they're like, oh, let's just keep building on this and keep building and keep building. And my dad was just so consumed with making more money and having the best things and this and that. And he lost it all. By the time I was 18, he had lost it all. Um, and so I had like a kind of a front row seat to that whole idea of the American dream. And it always, there's obviously different takes on what that is. It used to be like the white picket fence and the nuclear family and the
right.
whatever. Um, but and then also one of the first times I ever came face to face with this idea of the quote unquote American dream is when I'm like 7 years old and my grandma takes me to see this cartoon that I thought was just a fun cartoon about a mouse coming to America. It's called
Hmm.
An American Tale, and I was like, this resonates with me for some reason. I can't tell why. They're singing about like there are no cats in America, the streets are paved with gold, and yada. And I've grown up around and been around immigrants from everywhere on this in this world, and they all kind of fit the same profile where they come here and they work and work and work. And some of them like are just some of them are they come here with their families and they want to work to provide for their kids. Some of them just come here, they want to just make money, and they will make money. They want to make money however they can. If they have to work 18 jobs, they'll do that. And if they are working 18 jobs, literally they're like 5 jobs, 3 jobs, whatever, they're working 100 hours a week. that's not a life. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully, the guys who are out there delivering groceries or delivering dinner on their scooters outside my window when it's like pouring rain or sleet or frozen, and they're delivering all these things to people who tip them $3 or $5. Hopefully they I hope they make it rich, but like they're all working their butts off because there's this idea that you can do that in America and you will get to another level. And it's like, maybe you can, but it's like at what cost? And
Hmm.
then there are the people like Yitz who, again, from all walks of life, from all different parts of the world, have come to this conclusion that I don't want to work 1,000 hours a week. I don't want to be that guy who's doing the honest day's labor, which, this is a podcast, so they can't see the quote unquote, but like, scrubbing 1 million toilets in the day or being out in the hot sun working, a job that you're getting paid nothing for because somebody could take advantage for you. That's not honest. You might be the honest one, but the transaction is not honest. So there's a lot of dishonesty
Yeah.
that immigrants have to deal with. If they, no matter how honest they want to be or they are, they still have to deal with dishonesty and people taking advantage of them. And so this idea of the American dream, it's such a fallacy to me. Um, I do believe you have more opportunities here than anywhere else, and you do have more opportunities to advance. Whether it's legally or illegally, that's your choice. But in some cases, like Yitz, when he comes here as a kid, he doesn't know any better.
Yeah.
That's the point. And a lot of people come here and they don't know anything. And you're thrown into this strange situation in this new country where the idea is you can get anything you want and everything is so much easier. And you do see wealth everywhere. And you see these ideas that or these images of people living these great lives and having all this money and anything is accessible here, but it's not. And so there's something really odd about that to me. As the child and grandchild of immigrants, um, who my life is writing. I have to sit around every day and be like, I know my family had to go through so much and do so much. A lot of things they did not tell me about and didn't want to tell me about in order for me to be here. And I had better be so damn grateful for this every single day because they couldn't have imagined this. I don't think
Right.
they could have. And so I have to always take that into account. And when I talk to other kids who are like children of immigrants or grandchildren or even immigrants themselves, I'm always kind of fascinated with trying to find out their family story or as much of it as they know because um, it's very telling like how much people are aware of what their family does for them
Yeah.
or did so they could be here. I don't know. It's a very interesting thing to me that just kind of constantly is constantly buzzing around my brain.
Yeah. Also, one more thing that I want to touch on before you go. There's a point in the novel where Elijah meets up with an old friend, and his friend mentions that Eve like greatly impacted his own career as a writer by giving him On Writing by Stephen King.
Mhm.
I wonder if that's an Easter egg for your own career, or if not, if you can tell us a little bit about your influences.
I mean, that is absolutely Stephen. That book is definitely an Easter egg for my own career. I've been reading Stephen King since I was literally like 8 years old. I wasn't a precocious kid, but I did like to, I was just so bored when I moved to the suburbs that I I was just like, I don't know what these kids are into, but I don't like any of these kids, and they're not reading, so I'm just going to keep reading. And Stephen King kind of just popped into my life because, you know, that was around the time when he started really like Carrie had come out like before I was born, and there were a few, or the film version of Carrie. There were a few adaptations of his work, but like I came of age when like Stephen King adaptations were on network television once a year, twice a year, and I remember it specifically, the original with Tim Curry. It just, oh my God, the damage that did to me. And I was I mean, I'm not, it's weird. I'm not a glutton for punishment. I'm not, but I was like, I need to read this book. Like, I am literally, I cannot go to sleep because I am so afraid of this clown eating me, but I need to read the book. And I tried reading it like when I was like 9, 10, and I think I did a good job. I've read it since then, so maybe it's clouded but like I think I get this a little bit more. And so he's just that man's imagination is so boundless. And I will hear no, like people be like, oh, he's not a good writer. I'm like, what are you talking about? Who are you? Like, I remember like I was just in this conversation with like some MFA kind of guy, and he was like, he's not such a good writer. I'm like, what are you talking about? Stephen King is not a good writer. Because he's not like, I don't know. He's not like I don't even want to say Raymond Carver because I think he's better. I think it's different. It's different. I'm not going to say he's not David Foster Wallace. I'm sorry. Um, but yeah, so Stephen King has been with me my entire life, and then I mean influences. Wow, Kafka is probably my biggest influence
Mm,
as a. It doesn't come out. I don't think it comes out in the style because if it did, it wouldn't be right because I've read so many different translations. So I'd be copying the translator more, I think. But the ideas are there. I think Yitz is sort of in a Kafkaesque situation. I think we all are in some way or another. But so he's always there. There's one part of the book specifically, and I don't try to use my influences I don't try to copy my influences, but there was one part, and I won't say what it was, but there was one part of the book where I was really stuck, and all I could think about was this Grace Paley short story, and she's one of my favorite writers. And it's really funny because I was walking down the street the other day, and someone had a tote bag from FSG that had a Grace Paley quote on it,
mm.
and I said, "She's the greatest American short story writer, in my opinion." And her friend goes, "Well, I would argue with you about that." I'm like, "Well, okay, you can." I just kept walking. I'm like, "Why I even bother that person? That was very weird." Um, so yeah, Grace Paley is a really big one. Oh, there's so many. Michael Chabon, obviously. I think that influence from all the modern influences, he's probably the most obvious. Zadie Smith. I mean, reading White Teeth was like a revelation.
Yeah.
I didn't even play with I touched on regional dialects a little bit, like when I was like trying to like explain things, like how Jerry the Fox, one of the characters, like his commercials had
Hmm.
this particular Chicago accent, but I'm like, I'm not going to do the Chicago accent throughout the entire thing because when I read White Teeth the first time, I was like, it was like reading Dickens. You're like, oh my God, these British writers have this way of being able to do this where it doesn't border on parody. I think Martin Amis was really good at that. Martin Amis is another influence. Oh, there's so many. I read so
Yeah.
much. I mean, one of the biggest books in my entire life, I've written so much about it, is Gatsby. So Fitzgerald, and his take on the American dream obviously is always resonating with me. I remember years ago, early on when the internet was kind of bubbling with more literary stuff, there was a lot of rumors that Jay Gatsby was Jewish, and so that's always stuck with me. And
Right.
so that kind of, I was like, well, what if he is? And that's kind of been in my head for when I was writing this. Edith Wharton's
Hmm.
one of my favorite writers. There's so many, so many.
Or for Jason Diamond fans listening right now, do you think you'll step into fiction again in the future?
I am almost finished with my next novel.
Interesting. Is there anything you can tell us about it?
I could, but like my agent has to be like, yeah, this is good. And say we should, send it to my editor. But if he hates it, then this is going to be really embarrassing in a few months. So, um, it's set in New York. That's all I could say.
Okay.
One of these days I'll write something that's not Chicago or New York. But if I'm going to do another novel, I really, um, my hope with this book, with Kaplan's plot, was there's, in the acknowledgments, I did this thing where I thought was a little crazy, but I thanked as many both living and dead friends, people I've never met, writers from Chicago that I love and respect. And because to me, it's like Chicago doesn't get enough appreciation as a great literary city. Because I think it's, if you're going to talk about New York, you have to talk about Chicago also, just because,
Mm-hmm.
just like, um, so much, there was like, you had the Harlem Renaissance, but in Chicago, you had like all the African American publishing as well. You have all the writers that live out here, but in Chicago, you got Poetry Magazine. It's all the journalists from there, all the fiction, everything.
Mm-hmm.
But New York, there's just something about New York novels that they're just so, I mean, they're just so wonderful. Like, I just love reading a good book about New York, and
Yeah.
I want to throw my hat in that ring and see if I can do it. So that's all I can say.
Well, I'm excited to read that, and I know your readers are as well.
I guess I'll just say I could explain this really fast because
Sure.
I do think it's, but everything I know about writing, I've learned through reading and
Mm-hmm.
or being edited. Um, And so I find that books about writing, I know a lot of writers, who have like several novels out, love to be like, I don't need those books. I don't need to read those. But I'm like, no, I love those books. And one of my best friends is Jami Attenberg, and she does Thousand Words of Summer, and I'm always reading that. Matt Bell did one. The agent Kate McKeon just did one that I still need to read. And I was telling her the other night, Kate, I was like, I love to paw through those books. Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
sit down and read them. I just kind of paw through them. And yeah, I think like, Jonathan Lethem has like an essay collection called, oh, I'm gonna blank on this now. As I'm saying it, the Ecstasy of Influence, I believe is called. If it's not that, I'm sorry, Jonathan Lethem, you're one of my favorite writers. But I love that I say the Ecstasy of Influence because I'm constantly influenced by things, and I'm constantly just looking around being like, wow, I'm just amazed by the world. And nothing does it more. Besides, movies are close, but like fiction and great writing just constantly makes me want to be a better person, a better husband, a better father, a better friend, and definitely a better writer. And so it's just so fun to be able to sort of be like, I am constantly being educated
Yeah.
every day of my life. I'm 45 and I'm still being educated. And I want to be educating myself to the day I die. So, yeah.
Well, that feels like a great note to leave off on. Kaplan's Plot is out now. Jason Diamond, thank you so much for joining us on Port Over.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciated it.
Thank you for listening. Poured Over is a Barnes & Noble production. To help other readers find us, please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.